For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Narnia, specifically the film adaptation of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is perhaps one of the most underrated films of all time. One of the few films to ever perfectly adapt a book to the big screen. And not just any book, but the book that changed the world forever. C.S. Lewis, the writer of the Chronicles of Narnia, published Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in 1950. I feel there were two big book series responsible for the biggest wave in pop culture. Those being Lord of the Rings and Narnia, which inspired the writings of all fantasy writers and film directors to come. These two series created the basis of fantasy creatures and world building that would eventually inspire projects like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, to name a couple. Book series that would never have had the cultural impact that they did if it weren't for Narnia and the Lord of the Rings. Narnia is what started it all. Narnia is what shaped the world of magical creatures and fantasy universes. The biggest reason for the cultural wave that Narnia created was the beautifully interwoven story that C.S. Lewis created. A story that mirrors the story of Jesus Christ and the death and resurrection, while being added to a unique and never-been-told fantasy story of the two sons and daughters of Adam and Eve fulfilling the Golden Age prophecy of Narnia. This brilliant blending of the story of Jesus led to a timeless story. After the success of the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter film adaptations, Disney decided they wanted a piece of the fantasy action and created The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie. The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe book and movie go hand in hand. The movie is one of the best book adaptations ever made, as it follows the book almost word for word while taking creative liberties to make the adaptation feel like the book, while adding or removing aspects that work better or worse for a film. My father explained the book and the movie to me like this. The story is so simplistic that a child could watch it and understand and enjoy it, while an adult could watch it and see the deep and complicated meaning. I feel their main reason for the Narnia film franchise failing was due to the bad timing of the series. For the series to feel original and unique, it should have been made around 10 years earlier, because while Narnia came before the hard-hitting franchises like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, it didn't beat them to the big screen. And the unique storyline that started it all just seemed kind of like a cheap knockoff of stories that came after it. Rewatching the series today, you can tell that it was underappreciated in its time and wasn't given enough thought. First of all, as I said earlier, this film was incredibly faithful to the original book, which is always the first step in making a good film adaptation, giving the fans what they loved about the book and moving it into an emotional and exciting experience that the book could never have given. This is what the movie gave us, with the same fun adventure and meaning of the book mixed in with an exciting and action-packed experience, making one of the most iconic soundtracks in the process, a soundtrack that hundreds of millions of people have heard. This film, however, could have been a tragic disaster if it weren't for one aspect. If this film were to have completely thrown out the Christian aspect of the book, it would not have succeeded, because that was the heart of the book. At its heart, Narnia is a brilliantly told allegory of the betrayal, death, and resurrection of Jesus, with Aslan being the surrogate for Jesus, the White Witch being the surrogate for the devil, Lucy, Susan, and Peter being the surrogate for the disciples of Jesus, and finally Edmund being the surrogate of Judas, the betrayer of Jesus. It's a great introduction to the story of Jesus for young kids, appealing to them with action and adventure and whimsy while telling a deep and compelling story. The brilliance of the story is that even non-believers can watch the movie and enjoy the story, the characters, the music, and not be worried about being lectured about the faith. The story appeals to believers and non-believers, bringing two giant audiences of the film closer together. My favorite character in Narnia is Edmund. Edmund plays the role of the believer turned away from the faith through the powerful temptation of the devil. It's a sympathetic role, as everyone can relate to him, but no one wants to relate to Edmund. He's unkind, dim, unfaithful, and gross, but the reality is that these are the qualities of a sinful creature, the sinful creature that we all are. We've all been tempted by the devil into the worst of actions, which makes us connect to Edmund, as we can easily put ourselves in his shoes. Edmund is tempted by the witch and betrays Aslan, leading to Aslan being sacrificed on the stone table in his stead. Much in the same way that Jesus died on the cross to save us all from our sins, Aslan dies to spare Edmund from the consequences of his sins. The story shows us that Jesus died to save us even from the worst of betrayals and sins. He gives us new life. This is shown through Edmund as he is redeemed in the final act of the movie, fighting on the right side of history and coming to believe. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. We see the power of Jesus through Aslan as he seeks to save Edmund from his fate of eternal death. Aslan seeks to save the lost. Narnia is timeless. The first film was incredible, and the book was even better. The two films following the first Narnia film were nowhere near as impactful as the first, but the movies are still some of the most underrated movies of all time. Narnia will always be one of the greatest stories ever told, and I hope this video convinced my brother, who thinks that The Lord of the Rings is the greatest story of all time, that Narnia just might top it. In any case, Narnia will always be special to me, and I hope it's special to you as well. C.S. Lewis created one of the greatest stories ever told, a story that I have no doubt will return to the big screen someday, better than ever. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.